トビデオ
Once upon a time, there was an old inventor who lived in a small village out in the Japanese countryside, and his greatest invention was a robot. The robot was a remarkable invention due to how well it could imitate a human being. It could drink water like a human being. It could walk in the rain like a human being. It could even sweat like a human being. But the most remarkable thing about the robot was how much it looked like a human being. A teenage girl, to be precise. The inventor raised the robot like she was his own granddaughter. The robot went to school, took walks in the countryside, and celebrated birthdays by getting a new body to signify her growing another year older. One day, the robot came home to discover that her grandfather had died suddenly and mysteriously. The only thing he left her was a recorded message that told the robot that one day her battery will run out and she will cease to exist without her grandfather. However, there was a chance to avoid such a fate. It turns out that the robot can become human, but only if she can make 30,000 friends. The robot takes this final will and testament to heart and immediately sets off to the more populous Tokyo, a place that surely one can find 30,000 people to become her friends. It is there in Tokyo where the robot discovers something new, a human singing for thousands of adoring fans. The robot deduces that this may be the best path to gain 30,000 friends, to become an idol singer. This is the story of the metal girl who wanted to be an idol singer. Her name is Tokiko Mima, but her friends call her Ki. I'm honestly shocked people don't talk about Ki the Metal Idol more. Released between 1994 and 1997, Ki the Metal Idol is a way more important anime than people should give it credit for. When talking about anime in the 90s, one of the biggest discussions surrounding that era of anime is the prevalence of experimental anime with dark, sometimes deconstructionist themes. Anime like Evangelion, Revolutionary Girl Utena, Serial Experiments Lain, and Now and Then Here and There are just some of the titles that sought to subvert tropes and take their respective genres down darker avenues than were previously explored. But it was Ki the Metal Idol that was the first to go down this path. The anime was the brainchild of one Hiroaki Sato. Sato's big claim to fame at that point was being one of the 3 animation directors for Akira, a position I'm pretty sure guaranteed you at least enough clout to head up your own project. And indeed, Sato was given the keys to the kingdom for this project because he not only was chief director for the entire project, but also wrote the entire screenplay and came up with the original concept itself. Ki the Metal Idol was, from the very outset, billed as an experimental title. The main goal in making this anime was to break the barriers in what kind of story could be told through anime. It had experimental shot composition, unconventional editing, postmodernist storytelling, dark subversive themes, the works. Experimental anime was nothing new, however. Belladonna of Sadness and Angel's Egg kind of beat Ki by a couple of decades. But I think the main goal that Sato and Studio Pierrot had in mind while making Ki was to introduce this unconventional style of anime to the anime buying public. In other words, do to otaku what David Lynch did to the American public back in 1990.
Diane, if you ever get up this way, that cherry pie is worth a stop.
And boy howdy did Studio Pierrot really want to get this title out to anime fans. The average single episode VHS was priced around 2,500 yen, with the first episode priced at 1,000 yen. That's around $20 and $10 in 1994 American dollars. To put this in perspective, the average OVA VHS at the time cost around 9,500 yen, which is around $80 American. And even though the prices for the Ki VHSs would eventually match those more expensive prices around the final volumes, the fact that Studio Pierrot even sold it at a comparatively dirt cheap price and therefore would wind up eating some of the cost shows you how much faith they had in this project. And all of this for an anime that barely appears on anyone's radar anymore. I said it once and I will say it again. It's shocking this anime isn't talked about more. Ki the Metal Idol has to be one of anime's best kept secrets. Whether intentional or unintentional, it really helped lay the groundwork for other postmodernist sci-fi anime titles that came out in the following decade. You could easily draw a line from Key and see how it influenced other titles like Serial Experiments Lain, Alien 9, and Textualized in direction, atmosphere, and storytelling. So if this anime is so influential, why has it been kept in the shadows? Well, let's take a good long look at this anime first and then see if we can find our answer. Now, probably the best place to start when looking at what made Key the Metal Idol so unique would be its direction. It's the kind of experimental direction that works for the tone this anime is going for, which is to completely disorient you and give you this unsettling feeling throughout the entire OVA. Sometimes they'll do this by using established techniques, such as Dutch angles, or applying the multiplane camera techniques that Osamu Dezaki pioneered in order to make a still frame more dynamic and dramatic. But then you have the techniques that, as far as I know, were completely unique for anime at the time. For instance, when they need to show the viewpoint of a robot on screen, they use animation that was shot from a video camera instead of the kind of camera you would see in a professional studio, which adds to the gritty sci-fi element of Key the Metal Idol. Or there's also the editing, which I think is the most crucial element to Key's experimental direction. While the overall narrative to Key the Metal Idol is fairly linear, within the episodes themselves, the story is told in a far more disjointed fashion. The scenes will often skip to events that have either already happened or will happen later, and then immediately go back to the last scene and have it finish. Sometimes they'll even show a still frame of a massive spoiler, but you won't know it because it's only there for a frame and it means very little without proper context. The editing even gets to a point where it feels like characters are having entire conversations between themselves in the present and people in the past.
How am I supposed to know who's who in the industry? I was delivering pizzas up until yesterday.
Don't get me wrong, I think it's great that you got his attention. What a break!
But my favorite piece of direction is how they will just cut out all dialogue and have an entire scene just be dominated by one sound. Such as this scene where an idol is getting an impromptu recording session set up in the middle of ICU, and the only sound that plays is the sound of her heart monitor. Or how whenever Key has a moment where her cold exterior begins to break, all sound cuts out and we only hear the sound of gears turning to make the scene more tense. It's not just the direction that heightens the unsettling factor of Key the Metal Idol, there's also the design of Key herself. Key's design sticks out to you immediately because she is doing a smooth criminal lean right on the edge of the uncanny valley. She looks exactly what a robot who's made to look exactly like a human would look, in that she looks more like a doll rather than a human. Her pale skin, her lanky limbs, her messy hair, her perfectly composed default facial expression, and those eyes. Those gorgeous, deeply disturbing lavender eyes with pupils the size of pinpricks. They are the eyes of a robot. Her design reminds me of what Hideaki Anno tried to accomplish with Rei Ayanami in Evangelion. He wanted to make her deeply unsettling by her lack of emotion and rudimentary movements, but it failed by the virtue of Rei being just too cute, and Anno is still paying the price to this day. With Key though, while she may have the element of moe to her thanks to her helplessness and overall innocence, that element is superseded by the fact that you can never fully shake the feeling that something is deeply wrong with this girl. Key's voice performance also really helps underline her mechanical nature, at least in the Ocean Group dub.
Key does not understand. Grandfather, Key's head must be broken.
And if that voice sounds a little familiar, here's a hint.
You're a princess, regal, commanding, confident. Feel the rising sun's warmth. Equestria needs you.
That's right, it's a young Nicole Oliver providing the voice of Key, and she kills it! Her voice is cold, mechanical, and unfeeling, and yet still has that hint of vulnerability and humanity that makes you sympathize with Key while still finding her genuinely disquieting. And while Junko Iwao also does a great job as Key, I also can't shake the fact that her performance sounds a little too cute.
お給料だってすごくたくさん。 それなのに断ったのはキーがいたせい。
So I gotta give it to Nicole Oliver for really knowing how to voice Key. Does that mean I would recommend the dub over sub?
Put these on account, please. To Sakura Kuriagawa.
How did you...
The dub is very of its time, meaning that you'll be getting a lot of stiff performances out of quite a few Canadians. And while some of the actors can break through the stiffness and deliver a pretty good performance like John Novak, there's just too many instances of where you hear the voice actor and not the character. This is especially apparent for the actress who plays Key's best friend Sakura. She does well in her role, up until she has to emote.
Get real! They can't make you human! Oh, Key, forgive me. I'm the one who needs to become human.
I looked up this actress and the only other thing of note she did was playing Fox Mulder's sister on The X-Files, so make of that what you will. So aside from the basic premise I gave in the beginning, what is Key the Metal Idol actually about? A lot of things, actually. And before we go any further, I'd like to remind you that there will be spoilers from this point on, so if you'd like to go into Key the Metal Idol blind, now's your chance to hop off. While the main plot of Key the Metal Idol is about the titular Key's quest to become an idol and stop being metal, that's not entirely what the anime is about. There are multiple subplots running alongside the one about Key and her friend turned manager Sakura trying to break into the idol industry. There's one about how a weapons manufacturing concern is testing remote-controlled robots called PPORs that are powered by a mysterious material called gel that's extracted from humans. There's one about a popular idol named Miho that Key looks up to and how she is actually a guinea pig for experiments done by the same company manufacturing the PPORs. There's the one about how a leader of a religious cult named Prince Snake Eye believes that Key has the power to perform miracles and wants her to join his cult so he can actually live up to the promises he has given to his people. There's one about how the president of Miho's fan club, Shuichi Tataki, is trying to uncover the mystery of a song that plays late at night through the electronics in his apartment. And finally, there's the mystery of why does Key gain magical superpowers in time of great duress, and why does she look more human when she uses said powers? The story is a seemingly complex one with multiple subplots running concurrently, but it's actually all well executed because all of them are connected with one another. And as the series goes on, the connections between the subplots become more and more numerous as we start to gain more information. Examples being how the cult subplot kicks off by having Prince Snake Eye witness Key using her powers for the first time to save a man who had first approached her to star in an adult video in the first episode, or how the existence of the PPORs has deep connections to both the Miho subplot and the mysterious death of Key's grandfather. The story is this intricately crafted blueprint that starts at multiple loosely connected points and converges towards the middle to form a complete whole. It helps that the beginning is kind of a slow burn. Some people might call this a pacing problem, but I think it benefits this kind of multifaceted story. There's a lot of information to take in with this kind of story, and the anime wants to ease you into everything before it starts building towards its inevitable climax. It's not perfect, however. The plot, constructed like the juggling act it is, does have to set some subplots aside to build on ones that take higher priority. So in some episodes, you'll get some brief obligatory scenes of characters doing something cryptic that won't pay off for another 3 episodes, just so you can be reminded by the anime to tell you, no, we haven't forgotten about this character, just please be patient for a little bit. And while I may defend the slow-paced beginning, it might be an acquired taste for some people. Like, Key doesn't even start taking her path towards idoldom seriously until the halfway point. But going back to how all the subplots are connected to one another to form a complete story. Every plot thread in development may be connected to one another, but I don't think that's the reason why such an intricate story like Key the Metal Idol works. In order to really know what makes Key the Metal Idol work on the level it does, you need to take a look at the themes. Historically, robots and other automata have been a part of Japanese culture longer than most people would think. One of the first successful instances of robotics came from the nation sometime around the 17th century with the invention of the karakuri ningyo, a mechanized puppet that provided entertainment either in the theater, during festivals, or just doing small parlor tricks at home. In fact, the karakuri puppets are a recurring visual motif in the anime itself. In 1796, one of the first texts on the subject of robotics was published in Japan. In 1928, the first robot in Japan, Gakutsensoku, was built and was known for how it could change its facial expression and move its hands. And in 1952, one of the first influential manga was published. The story of a robot with human emotions who longed to live the life of a normal human boy. Using artificial life as a vehicle to explore the idea of humanity and human nature is nothing new in Japanese media. Ki is no exception, and the theme it explores through humanity's relationship with robotics is a very heavy one, namely the objectification of human beings and how people in power seek to dehumanize and control those they see as beneath them. These themes are perfectly represented into one person, the main big bad, Gensako Ajo.
We'll start regardless. It's only 2 hours, you can rest afterwards.
Scum.
This is your atonement. Or would you prefer death to penance?
The president of Ajo Heavy Industries, Ajo is the man behind both the development of the PPOR robots as well as the development of the Miho experiment. He makes his motivations clear from the very start. The PPOR project comes not from a desire of profits, but from an obsession with machinery and his twisted belief on how it's far superior to flesh. To him, humans are ugly, impure, and flawed, while machines are clean, pure, and above all else, do what you tell them to do with zero complaint. This attitude ties into the overall etymology of the word robot. Coined in 1920 in a Czech play about a factory that uses a chemical substitute for protoplasm to manufacture living, simplified people, it comes from the Czech word robota, meaning forced labor, which in and of itself is derived from a word in Proto-Slavic, meaning slave. Ajo is a man who desires nothing but total control of his own environment and cares nothing for the lives of others. He sees other humans as resources, either through a form of labor or as a source of gel. He's not above kidnapping people off the streets just so they can serve as a cheap way to extract gel, nor does he care for listening to what other people have to say about his project. He just has enough power to disregard your thoughts and insult you while doing so. This attitude of total control extends to the people working directly under him. He dehumanizes his staff of scientists by addressing them by their simple codenames such as Staff A and Staff B, and keeps them constantly in a state of fear lest they wind up in a gel extraction tank. His treatment of the idols is obviously no better. Not only is he forcing Miho to regularly perform in a state that is constantly draining her of her life force, but he also still forces her to work even while she's bedridden in the hospital. Miho's replacement Beniko also doesn't fare well considering this is what she gets when she dares talk back to Ajo.
You little whore! Beniko is the idol singer. You're nothing. I only need you for your brain, not your arms, not your legs, not your breasts, your hair, or your face. Don't make that mistake again!
Understand.
I understand. I'm sorry.
And given his possessive desire to control everything violently if necessary, Ajo's obsession with robots is a lot dirtier than one would think.
Robot has no will of its own. They are all my slaves.
But as good of a representation of the ruling class's dehumanization of others that he is, Ajo is not the only character who carries with him humanity's inclination to use others for their own gain. There's also Seiichi Tamari, a seedy owner of an adult video production house who tries to coerce Ki into starting in one of his videos in the first episode. He's a character who sees women as nothing more than commodities to make money off of, a point that's underlined when it's revealed that he's also a legitimate talent scout who literally sells prospective idols to talent agencies. We also have Hikaru Tsurugi, Miho's ex-manager and the one who takes it on himself to make Ki into an idol. He's considered a prodigy in the idol business due to how many idols he's promoted through masterful choreography and voice coaching, but it's made very clear that he doesn't see the idols he mentors as human beings, but tools that he uses to create his quote-unquote art. And he's not afraid of letting them know that.
Please don't hit their faces. Bruises aren't nice.
If they want to behave like trash, that's how I'll treat them.
Even Prince Snake Eye, a character who has wholly good intentions, still initially sees Ki as just a meal ticket that can help legitimize his cult, and spends most of the latter half of the series sabotaging Ki's attempts to break into the show business just so she can come back to him. But the best way they show this theme of dehumanization is not through a character, but through an industry. The Japanese idol system is one of the biggest culture industries of Japan, and the controversial practices to which it commodifies and sells young girls as these idealized fantasies are well known. Idols are to abide by strict rules, suffer intense work schedules, and are forced to forsake any semblance of a personal life in exchange for fame. And even if the idol does everything correctly, follows every order Mr. Producer-san gives them, they can be let go by their agency regardless of their popularity and be blackballed by any future opportunities, all just because they found another young idol to pour their time and resources into. Key the Metal Idol is probably one of the first animes to call out the practices of the industry in the admittedly least subtle way. The top idol that Key looks up to, Miho, is an idol that has been made into the perfectly manufactured product. The Miho we see on stage is not the real Miho, but a perfectly constructed double crafted exactly to a perfect set of instructions. The real Miho is backstage, strapped into a device that drains her of her life force just so she can control the double and be forced to sing. The perfect controllable product. And near the end of the anime, Ajo and company realize that Miho may be on borrowed time after so many performances, so they immediately make it top priority to train her replacement and have her waiting in the wings while Miho forces herself to perform. The perfect, controllable, and disposable product. But let's go back to Key for a second. She fits into all of this not just as an example of how people objectify others, but what her character represents. Key herself is a deconstruction of an anime archetype that the idol industry has used in the past. The magical idol singer. Where most magical girls use their power to do good deeds or defend the innocent, the magical idol singer will use their powers to achieve their dream of stardom, usually through either aging them up or getting rid of a disability that prevents them from realizing their dream. The magical idol singer is a type of magical girl that leans very hard into the wish fulfillment factor, and can easily be interpreted as a form of propaganda by the idol industry to show how being an idol is this wonderful, attainable dream. Key's role is to act as a deconstruction of this archetype. She is set up as someone who has aspirations to be an idol, as well as someone with the capabilities for great magical powers. Powers that allow her to do great things as well as make her look human. But the thing is that Key has no control over when and how she uses these powers. The powers only show up when she's either under great emotional stress or feeling the emotions that many people have focused on her, and what her powers do is entirely dependent on what those emotions are. The magical idol singer, like most magical girls, will often see their magical girl self as a superhero persona, using their real self as a sort of secret identity. Key, not having full control over her powers, doesn't have that luxury. Whenever she goes into idol auditions, she ends up making a fool of herself because she can't use her powers to sing or dance. It's only when she briefly turns human during one that it catches the eye of Tsurugi and makes it his personal mission to bring that persona out of Key. But the biggest deconstruction bit comes when Key crashes the Miho concert gone awry and somehow finds herself on stage. In a typical magical idol singer anime, the protagonist would use their powers to put on a show that gives them fame and adoration from the crowd. Key, on the other hand, has powers that are completely dependent on whatever emotion a crowd is directing towards her at the time. So when she takes all the emotions of a crowd of people who are reacting in anger and confusion towards this unknown girl who is holding up the concert they are watching, this is what happens. But Key not only acts as a deconstruction of idol tropes, but also the tropes of being a robot. The price of being a very well-made robot that can pass as human is that people might not actually believe you're a robot. In the beginning, people refer to Key as a robot, and at first you think it's because they are aware of her condition. But it turns out that during childhood, she was teased for being the weird girl who thought she was a robot. And a conversation between Sakura and Tataki reveals that Sakura is just humoring Key when she says she believes she's a robot, and that she is secretly hoping that Key breaks out of the delusion that she is a robot. But it isn't until the last two episodes that the character of Key gets fully explored. The last two episodes of Key the Metal Idol are unique in that they are not 25 minutes long like the other 13, but feature length episodes clocking in around 96 minutes. They kinda have to be because a lot goes down in them, but we'll get more into that briefly. For now, in case you ignored my last spoiler warning, here's a double spoiler warning because even bigger, heavier plot details are going to be spoiled for the next few minutes. So either abandon ship now or strap in because things are about to get wild. Episode 14 somehow is simultaneously one of Key the Metal Idol's greatest strengths and greatest weaknesses. On one hand, it answers every question you may have had for the series up to this point. Every character's backstory and place in the overall narrative is fully explored, every crucial detail is gone over with a fine-tooth comb, and every mystery is given a thorough explanation. On the other hand, it's 90 minutes of pure, uncut exposition! This entire episode is a weapons-grade info dump. An encyclopedia's worth of plot is shoved down our throats. Essays worth of conversations and explanations that, to their credit, answer everything, but given the fact that it's done in 90 minutes, you better believe it becomes a chore to watch at some point.
So, according to your theory, Key only has two choices. She has to become a priestess or an idol singer because it's in keeping with her family tree.
You blatantly used me for knowledge and acquired as much as you wanted, like a thief.
It wasn't intended for the eyes of an outsider. Her magic wasn't meant to be explained, just accepted.
The girl and her grandfather are frozen by terror, so their images show up in clear detail.
Figure out the weight of 30,000 people, then calculate the size of every one of their thoughts.
So let me just give you the SparksNotes versions that let you in on all the important revelations. The gel that's extracted from human beings to power the PPORs is actually a material that's called, depending on which translation you're watching, Omoi, which is Japanese for thoughts and feelings, or Geist, which is German for mind and spirit. Either way, both translations get the point across that it's the life force or soul of a human being. It's the reason why excess amounts of it can result in superpowers, while excessive extraction of it will result in the human being dying or becoming a vegetable. Miho and Tsurugi had a Star is Born type of relationship that by all accounts turned ugly on both sides, with both blaming the other for their emotional pain. It's also revealed to us that Tsurugi sees Key as both a way to come back from the emotional turmoil that Miho left him, as well as indirectly get revenge on her. Dr. Mima, Key's grandfather, created the Mima formula, which is a set of scientific rules to explain that not only can gel power a robot, but it can only be controlled by the person who gave the gel. He also knew the secret of the gel and tried to halt the research on moral grounds, but that ultimately led to Ajo killing him. But the big twist, the big reveal that all this preamble is building towards, the climax of this episode that changes everything we know so far about this anime, is this. Key is not a robot. Let me repeat that. Key is not a robot. The girl we've been following throughout this entire series, who acts like a robot, speaks like a robot, and continually states that she is a robot, is a flesh and blood human being. It turns out that Key was born with a freakishly vast amount of Geist, or Omoi, in her, and thus is the reason why she becomes so powerful when she briefly takes on a human form. However, this also made her a target for Ajo, who would have wanted to use her as a nearly limitless supply for gel, and would have hunted her down like he did for Key's mother, which resulted in her death. So in order to protect Key, Dr. Mima suppressed the Geist within Key's system, and was able to keep her off Ajo's radar. But in doing so, he suppressed all of her emotions and humanity and turned her into a flesh and blood robot. And in order to reverse this, Key would need the power of at least 30,000 people focusing their positive emotions to her and her alone. I.e., making friends with 30,000 people will make her human. This is, quite frankly, a really good twist. It fits with both the story and theming, and above all else, actually answers questions rather than raising more of them in their place. Key being human changes what we know about her and the world around her, and it makes her raison d'etre for making 30,000 friends all the more pertinent. It's not about curing a Pinocchio syndrome or trying to beat the clock for some non-existent battery to run out. It's to get back to her true self. This twist and everything leading up to it is all just good examples of why Key the Metal Idol is such a painfully underrated anime. So why has it been forgotten by so many? Now, so the reason why Key the Metal Idol never got the legacy it deserved when compared to that of its peers, my guess is that it might have had something to do with the ending. Not to say that it was a bad ending, quite the opposite. It's an ending that fits with the themes of the story and is a logical conclusion to Key's journey. Without giving away more than I already have at this point, Key the Metal Idol ends with Key becoming human and almost rejecting it because the surge of emotions is too painful to bear, but with the encouragement of the crowd who has been wondering who the mysterious idol named Key is able to overcome the pain of sorrow and deliver a beautiful song that fully makes her human while putting a stop to Ajo's plan to drain the concert goers of all their life force. It's a beautiful, triumphant, and kind of bittersweet ending that concludes Key's story in a satisfying and meaningful way. The problem is that the ending is very straightforward. The hero's emotional journey is over. There's nowhere else the story can go after that. Compare this ending to Neon Genesis Evangelion, which came out at the same time. That ending was the result of a shot budget and a director working through his own personal bullshit. It's an ending that was still completely open for discussion regarding its entire meaning. And after we got a proper, more straightforward ending a year later, relatively speaking of course, the TV ending is still one of the most hotly discussed topics in anime. It confused and enraged fans. It was a topic of message boards for decades. It forever changed the industry landscape. And one of those changes was that it rendered the OVA format that Key the Metal Idol was made in practically obsolete. In a short behind-the-scenes clip promoting Key, Sato is extolling the virtues of the OVA format, talking about how it allows for more freedom in regards to what kind of stories and themes you could tell when compared to what you could get on TV. It seems like both he and Studio Pierrot themselves really believed in the OVA format. I mean, Studio Pierrot was the studio that popularized it after all, but both of them honestly believe that the OVA was the realm for artsier anime that is constantly pushing the boundaries of animation and storytelling. Then along comes a story that aired on TV about a boy forced to get in the robot that shakes up the entire industry. It showed that TV was just as capable as making groundbreaking anime just as much as any OVA. As far as I know, Key the Metal Idol was not a failure. It appeared to be quite successful and without a doubt influenced a lot of anime that came after it. But most of those animes ended up airing on TV, and not on OVAs. Key the Metal Idol explored dark themes, employed experimental direction, crafted with a plot filled with intricate twists and turns, and it even played with the meta-narrative at points. And Evangelion did all of that, and more. Key broke new ground with a shovel, Evangelion broke new ground with dynamite. It's a shame that Key the Metal Idol's legacy is shrouded in the shadows of the anime that came after it because it really doesn't deserve that fate at all. It wasn't an anime that came a couple of years too early, or stricken with a common first but also the worst syndrome that affects other media. It's a brilliantly crafted story that does exactly what it set out to do and pulled it off without a hitch. But you can't help but feel like it's a lot quainter when compared to the anime it helped inspire. Its commitment to coherency and explaining all the details means there's very little to be said once everything's wrapped up. But don't let that dissuade you from checking out Key the Metal Idol. It's still an amazing story that handles everything from its direction to its themes incredibly well. And it's totally worth seeing where dark science fiction anime from the 90s and 2000s got their inspiration from. Just because there's a reason why a story about a girl who wanted to become an idol has been overshadowed for so long, that doesn't mean it should stay that way.
Key is leaving now.
Night owl calls while the dove soars across the silver moon. All alone the rose petals close